So let's talk about boundaries. Boundaries are demarcations, boundaries are not walls. So you can't say my walls are up and I use that as a boundary. No, most of us set up these boundaries to keep things from coming in. But the actual objective of a boundary is to keep the value of the thing that you're demarcating. The one thing that boundaries help with is to increase our authenticity. A good child is a child who learns how to detach from emotions so that they don't inconvenience their environment. So if you find yourself struggling as an adult to actually say no, to say this is wrong, there might be some boundary work that you want to do there. Because what you are taught is your needs are less than the other person. How you start to set up boundaries is by realizing and recognizing the self-value. How you perceive yourself becomes how you perceive the world, and it becomes how the world perceives you. Hey guys, welcome to Therapy Tales, episode 5. Like 5 is like ni mkono mzima, like 5. So thank you for listening all the way from 1 to 5. Well, I hope you have listened, and thank you for subscribing. So in episode 4, we talked about how early childhood experiences cause us to get into either healthy or unhealthy relationships. Today we are going to talk about how early childhood experiences determine how we set up boundaries or how we don't have boundaries. Okay, so welcome and just keep me company. Piga story kidogo as we learn something. One of the things that I really aim to do, and one of the goals for me being a therapist, was to offer information that transforms. So I share information that is transformative, and I hope this has been beneficial in terms of just you learning different things. Also because in my practice, I say the brain cannot change what it doesn't understand. So we first have to teach the brain what it needs to do, then it will change for us. So welcome to episode 5. So let's talk about boundaries. What are they? How do they look like? How do we set up boundaries? And let's get into it. What is or what are boundaries? So you got to think of boundaries this way. As much as most of us set up boundaries to keep things out, boundaries are demarcations, either psychological, spiritual, physical, or cognitive or emotional. These are demarcations, meaning limits that we say, no, if you cross this limit, there's an effect on that. So you got to look at boundaries as demarcations. Most of us set up these boundaries to keep things from coming in. But the actual objective of a boundary is to keep the value of the thing that you're demarcating, to keep the value. Subsequently, when you keep the value, you increase the value. So boundaries are mainly to protect and to grow the value of whatever thing that you want to protect from. I want you to understand this. Boundaries are demarcations. Boundaries are not walls. So you can't say my walls are up and I use that as a boundary. No. Walls actually close you in because there's no ventilation in walls. There's no light that comes into it. Boundaries can be mid-sized, high, or low, however, but it's a very strong demarcation saying the value in here is very valuable, and subsequently, I don't want anything that interferes with the value internally. So boundaries are demarcations. How do we learn to either set up or not set up boundaries in early childhood experiences? Have you ever found yourself saying, I think I'm just a people pleaser, or I feel guilty when I say no, or I just can't seem to say, I don't want to say yes because it's going to hurt that person, but I can't seem to say no. That is a learned experience from your early childhood that has a belief structure that doesn't give you or did not foster you the autonomy or the agency to actually be authentic with yourself and subsequently be authentic with other people. The one thing that boundaries help with is they actually help increase our authenticity. I like what Dr. Gabor says. When you're looking at authenticity, you got to understand this. Authenticity is the realness. It's just who you are as a person, being aware of your strengths, weaknesses, brokenness, wholeness, beauty, not beauty, anger, all those things, and balancing that wholeness to actually say, all these parts are part of me, and there's nothing wrong with these bad parts. So boundaries help to foster authenticity within ourselves and within other people. Now, coming up to early childhood experiences, let's say we have this good child that we talked about in episode 3. And the good child is this child who hakuwa napiga kelele, the child never used to disturb their parents. The child does what their parents wanting the child to do. So you're a good child. How boundaries are taught to you is that you have no say in what your external environment is asking of you. So most of the time, you will actually go with what the environment is asking of you. Because a good child, quote unquote, their emotional needs have been neglected. Because remember, we say that a good child is a child who learns how to detach from their emotions so that they don't inconvenience their environment. So if you find yourself struggling as an adult to actually say no, to say this is wrong, to say I don't stand for this kind of disrespect, if you actually find that you're more inclined to being a nice person, there might be some boundary work that you want to do there. Because what you were taught is your needs are less than the other person. Now, in my practice, I train my clients to understand my clients' needs are not above the other person's needs. The needs are alongside the other person. When we want to emotionally connect and in a healthy way, we don't elevate our own needs and subjugate others' needs. Our needs are equally as important as other people's needs, unless it's a self-sacrificing situation, which the person can choose to do so. So I want to talk about now people pleasing and how that was fostered in childhood. Let's say whenever you did something, you were affirmed for it as a child. And by something, I mean maybe coming home when your uniform is clean. And I'm talking about children who are below the age of 10, because play is very, very important for the development of the child. So you are that child who you came home, your uniform is clean. Again, children below the ages of 10. You came home, you found a way to do your homework in school. Nothing wrong with that. You came home and you are the one who arranged the house. You are the caregiver of your siblings, even when you are a child. You're the one who ensures that everything is running healthily or functionally in this home. What you learned overally is that you have to prioritize everybody's needs above your own. So how does people pleasing come into play? If I'm an external party and I come and tell you, I need you to do 1, 2, 3 for me, because you're so used to caregiving and you're so used to caring for other people's emotional needs, even though you have so much things that you're holding in your hand, it's very difficult for you to actually say, no, Nyambura, I don't take that. And that's how people pleasing is fostered in early childhood experiences. So how do boundaries look like, or lack thereof boundaries look like in relationships, at the workplace, in parenting? Blanketly, people will say, huyu ananga shida, we mwongeleshe tu atakubali. There's a perception that you just go with the flow, especially when you hear people saying, oh, I'm just somebody who goes with the flow. Very, very rarely do you find strong demarcations or strong boundaries. Now, in couple relationships, how boundaries or lack of boundaries looks like is a disconnection in communication. How? If you're a couple or if you're in a relationship and somebody asks you to do something and you don't know how to say no, because remember, early childhood experiences take away, adverse childhood experiences take away our agency or our need to control or our need to direct life as we want it to be. And you're in a relationship and your partner says, I want you to do this for me, but you don't know how to say no. So you do it, but you do it begrudgingly. That will affect your communication. So a lack of boundaries in couple relationship actually looks like distorted communication. A lack of boundaries in couple relationships is when we evaluate it as a marriage family therapist, you always evaluate it in sexual relationships where there seems to be an emotional disconnection in sex. Why? Because there's no communication. A lack of boundaries in couple relationship will also look like and feel like loneliness, where you feel like my partner is doesn't understand me or my partner doesn't seem to understand my emotional needs. Why is this a lack of a boundary? Because boundaries, apart from setting up demarcation, require us to communicate our emotional needs so that our partners know how to meet our emotional needs. A lack of boundaries on our partner looks like them not telling us, I don't know how to meet your emotional need. Can you help me learn how to meet your emotional needs? So whereas we look at boundaries as if it's just one isolated case, and for me, where I've seen a lot of boundaries comes in is the need to put up boundaries at work. Normally, we say how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you struggle with boundaries in your family of origin, if you struggle with boundaries even at work, you're most likely going to struggle with boundaries in your relationship. Let's go to the single person. A lack of boundaries looks like being that one who takes care of everybody's emotional needs. You're the strong one in the group. You're the person people call to let you know that this is happening to me, because you just take it in. You don't know how to say no. So if somebody calls you and tell you, oh, I'm going through this, you want to be nice to them. That's how a lack of boundary looks like. And in the workplace is literally just constantly. And I know sometimes this is unavoidable, taking on projects after projects, and you feel like you can't say no because there's a fear of losing something. I hope that has been extensive in understanding how a lack of boundary looks like. So, how do we start to reinstate boundaries? Remember, I started by saying that boundaries demarcate and protect the value and subsequently increase the value of the property that you're wanting to demarcate and protect. How you start to set up boundaries is by realizing and recognizing the self value. How you perceive yourself becomes how you perceive the world, and it becomes how the world perceives you. A lot of the work in therapy is actually challenging the belief structure that most of us hold about ourselves. As ourselves, like, I am unlovable or there's something wrong with me. The reality is all of us are broken as human beings. All 9 billion and something of us, sisi wote tuko na kasoro mahali, all of us. And that's why we feel like there's an inadequacy. So in therapy, the work is to help you accept the inadequacy without it meaning something towards your identity. And that's how you start to see your self-value. So what does the work look like in demarcating values? Number one, in demarcating, putting up boundaries. One, identifying your self-value, identifying the value of your work, identifying the value of your relationship, and anchoring new values towards all these three things. Why is it important to demarcate or to put up boundaries? Because think of it this way. Let's say you have a property, maybe somewhere in Kitengela. You know that's your property, you know that's your land. But you have not put up a boundary, you've not put up a demarcation. Ni kale tu ka beacon bado kako. But people know that is Nyambura's land. But I haven't put up a demarcation to actually say, a demarcation and I get to actually say that is Nyambura's land. Mtu yoyote ambaye anapitia hapo, if they feel like going for a long call, they go there. They feel like going for a short call, if they feel like dumping things, they dump there. If they feel like they want to sleep, they sleep there. So a lack of boundary allows so many dysfunctionalities and so many things to happen within the area that you need to protect in terms of values. Building boundaries starts with understanding which kind of childhood experiences you went through, the effect of those childhood experiences, how they were fashioned or how they were formulated or how they were shown to you, what you picked up, dropping all those things and creating a new identity that is visible to your self-value and self-worth. And all this happens in therapy. So I hope you've understood the importance of boundaries. I hope you've understood Boundaries are demarcations, not walls. I hope you've understood the need to put up boundaries. So, how then do you communicate, or how do you have conversations with people about the demarcations that they can't cross? Really, it's conversations. And these conversations ought to be edifying. If somebody crosses my boundary, at least for the first time, what I personally do, I will sit down with the person and say, listen, you know, this is my boundary. Respect, care, presence, reliability. These are my boundaries. I don't feel like you've been respecting my boundaries, but there's hard cost. The person apologizes. And maybe because we are human beings, it happens again. I'll sit down and have a conversation. For me, my rule is if it happens more than 2 times, now that's a pattern and I'm not responsible for it. So for me, I will have a conversation, one, the first time, and the second time. If the pattern keeps on repeating itself, I choose how I'm going to relate with this person. I say if it's personal or professional, and then I choose how to relate with them. So how we set up boundaries and how we ensure other people respect our boundaries is by edifying communication. Thank you so much and see you in episode 6.